The keys rattled in my hand as I stepped onto the porch, the weight of the day pressing against my shoulders. I paused for a moment, adjusting my grip on the bouquet of white lilies, Celine's favorite. In my pocket, a small velvet box rested securely, the engagement necklace inside, meant to mark our new beginning. I had planned everything. Tonight was supposed to be special. But as I slid the key into the lock and pushed the door open, an eerie silence greeted me. The house felt wrong. "Celine," I called, stepping inside. The only response was the quiet hum of the fridge from the kitchen. My pulse quickened. I scanned the living room. A picture frame lay face down on the coffee table. The one from our honeymoon in Santorini. My chest tightened as I moved toward it. The glass was cracked. Something was off. A sudden cold dread crept into my veins as I noticed the subtle details. The overturned chair near the fireplace, the scattered magazines, the broken wine glass near the counter. And then, the worst sign yet, Celine's phone, lying abandoned on the couch. The screen was shattered. Celine never left her phone behind. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward the hallway. Her purse sat on the kitchen counter, untouched. Inside, her wallet, keys, and ID were neatly arranged, as if she had just set them down before vanishing into thin air. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my own phone. My fingers hovered over her name in my contacts before I pressed the call button. Ringing. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then voicemail. A wave of unease crawled up my spine. Celine never ignored my calls. Something was very, very wrong. I scrolled down to the next name. Mira Bennett. Celine's best friend. If anyone knew where she was, it would be Mira. She picked up on the third ring. Dorian. Her voice was too high-pitched. A dead giveaway. My mind immediately went into analysis mode, breaking down the hesitation in her tone, the fraction of a second delay before she answered. "Mira, have you seen Celine?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. A pause. Too long. I could hear her breathing. "No," she said finally, too quickly. "Why?" I clenched my jaw. She was lying. "She's not home. Her phone's here, but she's gone." Oh, another pause. Maybe she went out for a walk. At night? Without her phone. Mira inhaled sharply. I don't know, Dorian. I haven't seen her." Lies. I could hear the quiver in her voice. Something was wrong, and Mira was covering for her. I ended the call, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I noticed something else. The door to our bedroom was ajar. I stepped forward cautiously, my mind racing. Inside, everything seemed in place at first glance. The bed was neatly made, her jewelry box resting on the dresser. I hesitated before walking toward it. A strange feeling twisted in my gut. I ran my fingers along the ornate wooden box, a relic from our honeymoon. But then, I noticed something. A seam that shouldn't be there. I pressed gently. Click. The false bottom popped open, revealing something that didn't belong. A burner phone. My breath hitched. The cheap plastic casing was a stark contrast to Celine's usual sleek, modern devices. My hands trembled as I powered it on, dread pooling in my stomach. Messages flooded the screen. Short, cryptic, coded phrases that even I, one of the top cryptographers in the country, couldn't instantly decode. What the hell was this? Before I could dig further, my own phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, my voice tight. "Hello." A gruff voice on the other end, urgent and unwavering. "Mr. Vale, we found your wife. She's barely alive. You need to come now." The world tilted. My throat dried as I struggled to respond. "Where?" "The Starlight Motel. Room 214. Get here fast." Click. The line went dead. I stood frozen, the burner phone still clutched in my left hand, the lilies in my right. They suddenly felt ridiculous. A cruel joke. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, carrying me toward the door. I didn't even realize I had dropped the flowers until I heard them hit the floor. The velvet box, too, slipped from my pocket, rolling under the couch. Forgotten. As I drove through the darkened streets, my thoughts twisted into knots. Celine was hurt. Badly. But what the hell had she been involved in? And why did I have this sinking feeling that I had only uncovered the tip of something much, much worse? The neon glow of the Starlight Motel flickered weakly in the distance, casting eerie shadows along the cracked pavement. I barely noticed the rundown exterior as I pulled into the lot, my mind consumed with 1,000 questions. Celine. Barely alive. The words replayed in my head, each repetition like a hammer against my skull. What the hell had she been doing here? I killed the engine and stepped out, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. Red and blue police lights painted the world in a chaotic glow. Officers moved in tight clusters, speaking in hushed tones. An ambulance stood by, its back doors thrown open. Then I saw her. Celine was being wheeled out on a stretcher, paramedics working quickly. Her dark hair was tangled, face bruised and pale beneath the harsh motel lights. A deep gash ran along her forehead, blood staining the collar of her torn blouse. For a split second, she opened her eyes. Her gaze met mine. "Dorian," she whispered, barely audible over the noise. Then she was gone, swallowed by the ambulance as the doors slammed shut. "Mr. Vale?" I turned sharply. A man stood before me, his features shadowed under the brim of his hat. Detective Elias Vaughn. His reputation preceded him, a man known for his ruthless efficiency, a bloodhound when it came to solving cases. "You got here fast," Vaughn noted, his gaze sharp, assessing. "Not fast enough," I muttered. "What happened?" Vaughn studied me for a moment before pulling out a small notepad. "We found your wife in room 214 with a man. Ronan Graves. He was driving a red Porsche. Smashed it into a streetlight just outside the motel." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Ronan Graves. Celine's ex from college. She never mentioned him, I said, more to myself than to Vaughn. The detective raised an eyebrow. "That's odd, because according to motel records, this isn't the first time they've met here." A cold weight settled in my chest. "She wasn't cheating on me," I said, almost as if saying it aloud would make it true. Vaughn shrugged, flipping through his notes. "Maybe, maybe not. But here's what I do know. Graves was driving under the influence. He's in critical condition. We found some interesting things in his car. And in the motel room." I swallowed hard. "What kind of things?" The detective gave me a measured look. "A briefcase filled with classified documents. Stolen data from a highly secured government database. That's why we're involved." The air left my lungs. "Classified documents." I repeated. "What the hell would Ronan have those for?" "You tell me, Mr. Vale." Vaughn's eyes darkened. "Your wife is at the center of something much bigger than just an affair." I should have been relieved. But I wasn't. Because that only meant one thing. Celine wasn't just lying to me about Ronan. She was lying about something far worse. "Do you have any idea what she was involved in?" Vaughn pressed. I hesitated. The burner phone in my pocket felt heavier than before. "Not yet," I lied. Vaughn studied me, his expression unreadable. "She's being taken to Westbridge Medical. If you want answers, that's where you'll get them." I nodded, my grip tightening around my keys. As I turned to leave, Vaughn spoke again. "One more thing, Mr. Vale." I looked over my shoulder. "The crash? It wasn't an accident." His words sliced through me. "What do you mean?" Vaughn's jaw tensed. "Someone tampered with the brakes. Someone wanted Graves dead." A chill crawled down my spine. And if Celine had been in that car with him, someone wanted her gone too. The waiting room at Westbridge Medical smelled of antiseptic and bad coffee. My knee bounced impatiently as I sat in a stiff plastic chair, waiting for an update. Every second felt like an eternity. My mind spun in circles. The burner phone. The stolen data. The deliberate crash. How deep did this go? I pulled out the burner phone, scrolling through the coded messages. The encryption was complex. Whoever sent these knew what they were doing. But I was one of the best cryptographers in the business. I could break it. Before I could start, a shadow fell over me. Trying to reach someone? I looked up. Mira Bennett. Celine's best friend. I hadn't called her, but she was here. That alone set off alarm bells in my head. "How did you know she was in the hospital?" I asked, standing. She hesitated. A nervous glance toward the hallway. "I saw the news." I narrowed my eyes. "On what channel?" She bit her lip. "Dorian, please." "Mira," I said, my voice low, steady. "Are you going to lie to me again?" Her shoulders slumped. She took a deep breath, then pulled out her phone. After a few taps, she turned the screen toward me. A message thread. Celine's name at the top. "Mira, if anything happens to me, tell Dorian to check the archive." My pulse spiked. "What archive?" "I don't know," Mira whispered. "That's all she sent me." I exhaled sharply, my mind racing. Then a nurse walked into the room. "Mr. Vale." I turned instantly. "Your wife is stable," she said. "But she's asking for you." Celine looked fragile in the hospital bed, her face pale against the stark white sheets. Her left arm was wrapped in a sling, and N4 dripped into her right hand. Her eyes fluttered open when I stepped inside. Dorian, she breathed, her voice weak. I stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. I found the burner phone, Celine. Her expression didn't change, but I saw it, the flicker of fear. You've been lying to me, I continued. Not just about Ronan. About everything. She swallowed hard. You're going to tell me the truth, I said. All of it. She closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, I was trying to protect you. I let out a humorless laugh. Protect me? From what? Her fingers curled into the bedsheet. From them. I froze. Who's them, Celine? She hesitated, then. A beeping sound interrupted her. I turned. Her heart rate monitor was spiking. The nurse rushed in, checking the 4. Something was wrong. Celine's eyes widened in sudden panic. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something. Then her body convulsed. She's crashing, the nurse yelled. I took a step back as doctors swarmed around her. A cold realization hit me. Someone didn't want Celine to talk, and I was their next target. I sat beside Celine's hospital bed, gripping the edge of the chair like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors filled the silence, each one a reminder that she was still alive, barely. I didn't know what I was feeling. Rage? Betrayal? Fear? All I knew was that the woman lying in this bed had been keeping secrets from me for years. And yet, when I saw her like this, bruised, pale, hooked up to machines, I didn't want to interrogate her. I just wanted her to open her eyes. Mira sat across from me, arms wrapped around herself. She hadn't said much since we got here. I didn't blame her. This wasn't something either of us knew how to process. The door creaked open, and Detective Vaughn stepped inside. He glanced at Celine, then at me. She's lucky to be alive. I swallowed. She shouldn't be here at all. Vaughn crossed his arms. I won't waste your time, Vale. Someone tampered with her 4. We found traces of a paralytic agent in the line, just enough to shut down her respiratory system. Mira inhaled sharply. They tried to. She couldn't finish the sentence. I could. They tried to kill her. Vaughn's face was unreadable. The only reason she survived is because the dosage was slightly off. A mistake. Otherwise. He let the thought hang in the air. I exhaled through my nose, trying to control the storm inside me. Do you have any leads? I asked. Vaughn's gaze sharpened. That's what I was hoping you could tell me. I frowned. Me. He tilted his head. Come on, Vale. Let's not pretend this is just some random attack. You show up at a crime scene where your wife is found barely alive. You start asking questions before the investigation even begins. And now, she's targeted in a hospital. I clenched my fists. You think I had something to do with this? Vaughn didn't answer right away. He just studied me, waiting for me to break. I met his gaze, forcing my voice to stay steady. If I wanted Celine dead, I wouldn't be sitting here. Vaughn exhaled, his expression softening just barely. Then tell me what's going on. Because whatever this is, it's bigger than just a bad marriage. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone I had found in Celine's jewelry box. I held it up. This is what's going on. Vaughn took the phone, turning it over in his hands. You cracked it. Just barely. I leaned forward. It's filled with encrypted messages, high-level encryption. Stuff even I had to work through carefully. Vaughn raised an eyebrow. And I swallowed. Whoever was sending these messages, they were talking about me. I watched Vaughn's expression shift, ever so slightly. They called me the asset, I continued. They said I had no idea. I saw the moment it clicked for him. Vaughn had spent enough time dealing with intelligence operations to understand what that meant. I had been a pawn. For how long? I had no idea. Vaughn let out a low breath. Jesus, Vale. Myra's voice was quiet. So she wasn't betraying you. I turned toward her. She was trying to protect you, she whispered. The words hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. For weeks, I had been so sure Celine was lying, cheating, playing me for a fool. And now? Now I wasn't sure what the hell to believe. I dragged a hand down my face. I need to talk to her. Vaughn nodded. As soon as she's awake, I'll be outside. But Vale. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. If your wife's in this deep, that means you are too. And whoever's behind this, they won't stop until both of you are gone. I nodded. Yeah, I figured that out when someone tried to kill her. Vaughn left, and for a moment, the silence between Mira and me stretched on. Then, finally, Mira whispered, Dorian, what if she's right? I looked at her. What if the people you work for aren't who you think they are? A lump formed in my throat. I don't know, I admitted. And that terrified me. The first thing I noticed when Celine opened her eyes was how tired she looked. Her lips were dry, her breathing shallow. But when she saw me sitting beside her, something in her expression shifted. Relief. She thought I was dead. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. You're in the hospital. She swallowed. I know. I watched her carefully. Do you know why someone tried to kill you? Celine flinched, turning her head toward the window. Because I got too close. My stomach tightened. Too close to what? She hesitated. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. Her entire body tensed. I decrypted the messages, I said. I saw everything. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and afraid. I know you were protecting me, I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. I just don't understand from who. She let out a slow breath, her fingers twitching against the sheets. Then, finally, the agency isn't what you think it is. A chill ran down my spine. What are you talking about? Celine exhaled. You work in encryption. You've built firewalls for some of the most secure databases in the country. But what happens when those firewalls are used to hide something? I frowned. I don't. Dorian, I was investigating an internal breach. Her voice was shaking now. Not an outside attack. An inside job. I felt like my lungs had turned to stone. The files I found, they weren't stolen from us. They were being sold. Leaked deliberately. By our own people. My vision blurred. No, that wasn't possible. Was it? You found this out? I whispered. She nodded weakly. So did Ronan. Something dark flickered inside me. Ronan had been working at my agency. Celine had been in contact with him for years. You were working with him, I said, the words like broken glass in my throat. Celine shook her head. I was trying to stop him. Trying to get proof before it was too late. She swallowed hard. I wasn't fast enough. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. All these years, I thought I had known who I was. What I did. But now? Now I didn't even know who the enemy was. Celine's voice was barely a whisper. They're going to come after you next, Dorian. I closed my eyes. I already knew that. And I also knew there was no way in hell I was going to let it happen. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I saw her eyes open. Celine blinked slowly, as if pulling herself out of something heavy. Her gaze was hazy, unfocused, and for a moment, I wasn't sure she even knew where she was. Then her eyes found mine, and I saw it. Not fear, not guilt, just relief. Like she had spent hours, days, maybe even weeks, preparing for the moment she would wake up, and I wouldn't be there. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. You almost died, I said, my voice lower than I intended. She took a slow, shallow breath. Yeah, she whispered, like she had already come to terms with it. I dragged a hand through my hair, exhaling sharply. Celine, I need you to be honest with me. No more half-truths. No more secrets. What the hell is going on? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just looked at me, like she was trying to memorize my face. Like she was deciding how much she could trust me. I wanted to shake her. I wanted to tell her she had no choice. I was already too deep. But the words got stuck somewhere between my lungs and my throat, because maybe she was right. Maybe if she had told me all of this weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed her. Maybe I would have thought she was paranoid, that she was overreaching, that she was lying. I exhaled through my nose, trying to steady myself. Celine, talk to me. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. And then, finally, she whispered, They're coming for you, Dorian. My stomach twisted. Who? She swallowed, her fingers twitching against the bed sheets. Victor Calloway. I flinched, actually flinched at the name. I had known Victor Calloway since I was 22 years old. He had recruited me straight out of grad school, mentored me, trained me. The man had been in my wedding, for God's sake. I shook my head, my throat going tight. No, that's not possible. Celine exhaled slowly. I know how it sounds. No, you don't. I snapped, harsher than I meant to. I pushed up from the chair, pacing the room. I trusted him. He built my career. He used you, Dorian. I stopped. Celine's voice was quieter now, more careful, like she knew exactly how much this was breaking me. He used you, she repeated. He knew how good you were. He saw your potential, and he built everything he needed around you. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Celine shifted against the pillows, watching me. Her voice was barely a whisper. The encryption systems you built? The security networks? They weren't just for national intelligence. I turned away from her, gripping the windowsill so hard my fingers ached. Victor has been selling intelligence for years. Not just to foreign governments, to anyone who will pay. He's built an entire network, and you." She hesitated, like she wasn't sure she should say it. "You were his greatest asset." The words knocked the breath out of me. The messages. The asset has no idea. It was about me. I pressed a hand against my chest, willing my heart to slow down. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. Victor Calloway had sat across from me at countless meetings. He had toasted to my promotions. He had been there when my mother died. And the whole time, he had been what? Using me? Grooming me into some kind of unwitting pawn in his game? I felt sick. Celine's voice was soft. "I tried to stop it, Dorian. That's why I started working with Ronan." I turned back to her, anger sparking in my chest. Ronan Graves? Her jaw tightened. He wasn't my lover, Dorian. He was my partner. He found the first trail, the first evidence of the leaks. He brought me in because he trusted me. And when he got too close, Calloway had him. She stopped, swallowing hard. I filled in the blanks. Killed. I exhaled sharply, dragging a hand over my face. "Jesus Christ, Celine." She shifted slightly, wincing at the movement. "I wasn't supposed to survive either," she admitted. "After Ronan died, I knew I had limited time. That's why I set up the failsafe. The encrypted messages. The archive. If something happened to me, I needed you to find them." I met her gaze. "Why me?" She let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Because you were the only one I still believed in." Something inside me cracked. I had spent weeks convincing myself that Celine had betrayed me, that she had used me, strung me along, made me a fool. And now I realized. She had been fighting for me. For months. Maybe longer. I dragged a hand through my hair, feeling unsteady. "We need to get out of here." Celine nodded. "They'll be watching the exits." "Then we don't use the exits." I turned toward Mira, who had been silent this whole time. She was gripping the armrest of her chair, her expression caught between shock and determination. "You still have connections with your uncle?" I asked. She blinked, then nodded. "He owns a few warehouses down by the docks. No security cameras. No paper trails." "Good," I said. "Call him. We need a car, no plates, and somewhere to lay low for a few hours." She pulled out her phone. On it. Celine tried to push herself up, but faltered. I was by her side in an instant, my hands on her arms. She looked up at me, her breath uneven. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I knew she wasn't just talking about this. About the agency, about Calloway, about everything. She was apologizing for all of it. For the night she had come home late. For the distance between us. For making me think, even for a second, that she had stopped loving me. I swallowed hard. I wasn't ready to forgive her. But I wasn't ready to lose her either. I nodded once. "Let's get out of here." She exhaled, then let me help her to her feet. I pulled her arm over my shoulder, steadying her weight. She leaned against me, breath hitching slightly, but didn't complain. And for the first time in months, I realized. She still felt like home. The hallway outside Celine's hospital room was too quiet. Too still. I could feel it in the air, the weight of something unseen, something waiting. Myra's voice was hushed as she pressed her phone to her ear, talking to her uncle, arranging the car. Celine leaned into me, her body weak from the injuries, but her mind sharp as ever. I could feel her tense muscles, the way her breath hitched every time she moved too fast. She wasn't just in pain. She was afraid. And that terrified me more than anything. Celine had always been the one who never flinched. She had always been the one who could stare down a crisis without blinking, who could walk through a fire without burning. But now, for the first time in years, she was leaning on me. And I wasn't going to let her fall. Mira tucked her phone away. "Car's ready. It's waiting near the service entrance. No plates, tinted windows." My uncle's guy wiped the VIN. I nodded. "Good. How do we get there without being seen?" Mira hesitated. "The main hallways are too risky." I scouted on the way in 2 men in suits near the front desk, pretending to be hospital administrators. "They're not real. The elevator's a no-go." Celine exhaled. "We take the basement." Mira frowned. "The basement?" Celine glanced at me. "Remember? The maintenance access tunnel?" And just like that, I did remember. Years ago, I had met Celine outside this hospital after one of Myra's bad breakups. We had sneaked into the basement to avoid running into her ex, found an old maintenance hallway that connected to a parking lot behind the loading docks. It was a long shot, but it was better than walking straight into an ambush. I adjusted my grip on Celine, steadying her. "Let's go." The hospital basement smelled like damp concrete and antiseptic. Dim fluorescent lights buzzed above us as we moved through the narrow corridor, our footsteps echoing against the cold tile. Celine was struggling to keep pace. I could feel the way her weight shifted, the exhaustion dragging at her. Every so often, I tightened my grip on her waist, keeping her steady. Almost there, I murmured, though I had no idea if that was true. Mira checked her phone. Car's in place. We just have to. A door slammed somewhere behind us. We all froze. Celine's breathing hitched. Myra's fingers tightened around her phone. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. My pulse spiked. They found us, Mira whispered. Celine clenched her jaw. We keep moving. I pulled her closer, guiding her toward the end of the hall. The exit door loomed ahead, rusted at the edges, freedom just beyond it. I reached for the handle. Hold it right there. A voice like gravel. We turned slowly. A man stood at the other end of the hallway, gun raised, his suit crisp and dark. And behind him, 3 more. My stomach dropped. We were trapped. The man in front, the one who had spoken, took a slow step forward. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held no hesitation. "Mr. Vale," he said, almost politely. "Come with us." My grip on Celine tightened. "Not a chance." He sighed, as if he had expected that answer. "You don't understand the situation you're in." I stared at him. "No, I think I do." He tilted his head. "Then you know we're not here to negotiate." Myra's breath was uneven beside me. Celine was too still. I could feel the rapid beat of her heart against my arm, the tension in her body. I needed to stall. I squared my shoulders. "Who sent you?" The man gave me a small, cold smile. "Come on, Mr. Vale. You already know." "Calloway." My blood turned ice. Celine shifted beside me. "If you take us, it won't be quiet. You know that, right?" The man exhaled through his nose, amused. "We have orders to keep you alive, Mrs. Vale. But we don't have orders to keep you comfortable." I clenched my jaw. Myra's hand moved subtly toward the phone in her pocket. I caught it. Too risky. One wrong move, and they'd shoot. Celine's voice was quiet. "Dorian." I looked at her. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was calculating. I recognized that look. It was the same expression she had when she was about to do something reckless. Something insane. And before I could stop her, she collapsed. Her body went limp against me, her head slumping forward. "Damn it," I hissed, catching her before she hit the ground. Mira let out a panicked breath. "Celine." The men hesitated. The leader took a cautious step closer. "What's wrong with her?" I forced myself to look panicked. "She just got out of surgery. She's not stable. If you don't let me get her out of here, she's going to." Celine twitched, let out a low, pained moan. I caught the flicker of hesitation in the leader's eyes. He turned slightly, glancing at his men. That was all I needed. I moved fast. With one arm still holding Celine, I reached down with the other and ripped the fire extinguisher from the wall. And then I swung. The metal collided with his face with a sickening crack. Mira screamed. The other 2 men lurched forward. I dropped the extinguisher, grabbed Celine, and ran. Mira was already moving, yanking the door open as bullets shattered the tile behind us. We sprinted through the loading docks, Celine barely holding on as I dragged her toward the waiting car. The black sedan was idling just beyond the fence. Mira threw the back door open, jumping inside. I lifted Celine, shoving her into the back seat before diving in after her. The driver, Myra's uncle's guy, bless him, didn't ask questions. He hit the gas. The tires screeched. The hospital disappeared behind us. Celine exhaled, pressing her forehead against my chest. "You crazy, reckless." I pulled her in tighter. God, I thought. "I'm fine," she whispered. I let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her hair. Mira twisted in her seat, breathless. That was insane. Celine let out a weak laugh. "Yeah, but it worked." I stared down at her, at the woman who had just risked everything so we could escape. And I realized I still loved her. Even after all of this. Even after the lies and the secrets and the betrayal. I still loved her. And I was going to keep her alive. No matter what it took. The warehouse was cold. Not the kind of cold that made you shiver, but the kind that seeped into your bones, reminding you how far you were from home. If home even existed anymore. Celine sat on the edge of an old shipping crate, her body slouched with exhaustion. She was holding herself together with sheer willpower, but I could see the way her fingers trembled when she exhaled, the way her body subtly leaned toward me without realizing it. Mira sat a few feet away, cross-legged on the concrete floor, idly spinning a wrench in her hands like a nervous tick. None of us spoke for a while. Maybe because there wasn't anything left to say. Or maybe because we all knew that once we did, we would have to face what came next. I knelt beside Celine, pressing a damp cloth against the bruise on her temple. She winced, but didn't pull away. "You should rest," I murmured. She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You keep saying that. Because you keep ignoring it." She smirked faintly, but the exhaustion in her eyes made my chest ache. I wanted to be mad at her. I wanted to tell her that everything she had done, every lie, every secret, every time she pushed me away, had almost cost her life. But right now, I was just grateful she was still here. Her fingers twitched against the crate. "You hate me, don't you?" I inhaled sharply. I should have said yes. I should have told her that I was furious, that I had spent months feeling like a fool, that I had questioned every moment we had ever shared. But when I looked at her, at the bruises on her skin, at the exhaustion in her shoulders, at the way she was waiting for me to push her away, I realized something. "I don't hate you," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Her lips parted slightly, as if she hadn't expected that. I swallowed. "But I don't know how to forgive you either." She nodded, looking down at her hands. "Yeah," she whispered. "I get that." The silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. It was just real. Mira exhaled loudly, breaking the tension. "Okay, so, not to ruin the moment, but we have a problem." I turned to her. "Which one?" Mira gestured toward the garage door. "The fact that Calloway is definitely hunting us right now. And unless you two are planning to run away and start a new life as fishermen, we need a plan." I sighed. "We're not running." Celine nodded in agreement. "No more hiding." Mira muttered something under her breath. "Of course. Suicidal, the both of you." I ignored her. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. The one with the messages. The one that had revealed everything. "I built Calloway's security systems," I said. "And I know how to take them apart." Mira raised an eyebrow. "You're saying you can hack the hacker?" I gave her a sharp smile. "I'm saying I can burn everything he built to the ground." Celine inhaled deeply. "You're sure?" I looked at her. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Her gaze softened. And for the first time in months, I saw it. The trust that had been buried beneath all the fear, all the secrets. She still believed in me. And I was finally ready to believe in her, too. An hour later, we had a plan. It was reckless. It was dangerous. And it was the only shot we had. Celine sat beside me as I set up my laptop, her fingers curled around a mug of cold coffee Mira had found in an old vending machine. Mira paced in the background, chewing her thumbnail. "Okay, walk me through this one more time," she said. "For the people in the room who aren't computer nerds." I sighed. Calloway's network is designed to be untraceable. Every transaction, every breach, every stolen file, it's all buried. Hidden behind layers of encryption that make it look like an inside job. Celine's voice was quiet. "Which means if you crack it open, it leads back to me," I finished. Mira stopped pacing. "Oh, that's bad." "Yeah." She frowned. "So how do we flip it?" I tapped the screen. "We don't just expose Calloway. We redirect everything. Every fake trail, every transaction, every stolen document. I'm going to trace them back to him." Myra's eyebrows shot up. "You can do that?" I smiled grimly. "I built the system. I know where the cracks are." Celine studied me carefully. "And when you do this?" I met her gaze. "It won't just take him down. It'll take down everyone. Every person who's been a part of this network. Every dirty agent. Every corrupt official. All of them." A heavy silence settled over the room. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was war. Mira exhaled. "Okay. Wow. This is a lot. But, one small problem." I glanced at her. "What?" She crossed her arms. "If Calloway realizes what you're doing, he's going to come for you. Hard." Celine stiffened beside me. I looked down at my hands. "I know." Mira tilted her head. "You're okay with that?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I wasn't okay with any of this. But I was done being afraid. I looked at Celine, then back at Mira. "We finish this," I said. "No matter what." Celine's fingers found mine beneath the table, lacing together, firm and steady. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. For the first time in a long time, we were on the same side again. And we were ready to burn it all down.